The Clockmaker's Curse. Chapter 1. The Stranger's Arrival. When Lawrence Fairchild rolled into the town of Stillbrook in late October, he brought the scent of autumn decay with him. He drove a battered, rust-colored van that sputtered and coughed like it had something to say, but thought better of it. The van bore no plates, no decals, just the faded words, Fairchild Clocks, painted on the side in a font that was once proud, but now sagged with age. Stillbrook was the kind of place that made a person wonder if they'd stumbled onto the edge of the map. The streets were narrow, the buildings sagged under the weight of too many winters, and the sky always seemed heavy with low-hanging clouds. People here were suspicious by nature, but not unkind. They watched Lawrence unpack his things, a collection of antique clocks, tools, and a peculiar black ledger, and muttered their greetings with wary politeness. Lawrence rented the storefront at the corner of Elm and Main, right next to Holbrook's Hardware. It had sat vacant for years, the kind of place kids dared each other to peek into, but never dared step inside. By the end of the week, a sign had appeared in the dusty window: Fairchild's Timeless Pieces, Repairs and Restorations. Chapter 2. The Tick-tock of Suspicion. At first, folks were charmed. Lawrence was soft-spoken but polite, with hands that moved like a pianist as he worked on clocks of all shapes and sizes. He fixed grandfather clocks that hadn't chimed in decades, repaired the shattered cuckoo clock at the church, and even brought old Mrs. Hendrickson's mantel clock back to life, a feat that earned him free pie at the diner every Sunday. But there was something off about him. Children whispered that they'd seen him talking to himself late at night in his shop, his silhouette lit by the flickering glow of an oil lamp. Teens claimed the clocks in the windows sometimes moved backward, their hands jerking unnaturally against the flow of time. And then there was the ledger. Sheriff Dan Porter saw it once, tucked under Lawrence's arm when he came to pick up a repaired clock for the station. Its cover was smooth black leather, unblemished by age, with no title or marking. But what caught the sheriff's attention was the way Lawrence clutched it like a lifeline, his knuckles pale against the dark surface. "Something important in there?" Dan asked casually. Lawrence's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just business records." Chapter 3. The Missing Time. In November, the trouble began. First, Mr. and Mrs. Carlson missed their grandson's birthday party because their clock, a freshly repaired heirloom, claimed it was still 10 a.m. when it was nearly noon. Then Holbrook swore his wristwatch stopped ticking entirely when he walked past Lawrence's shop. But the strangest incident involved young Emma Cartwright. She'd been playing near the town square when she wandered into Fairchild's shop out of curiosity. According to her, Lawrence had been kind, showing her a pocket watch he claimed was older than the stars. When she emerged, her mother screamed. Emma had only been inside the shop for 10 minutes, but her hair had turned stark white, and she swore it had been hours. Chapter 4. The Ledger Sheriff. Porter decided he'd had enough. He visited the shop under the pretense of asking about a clock repair, but kept his eyes peeled for anything unusual. He spotted the ledger almost immediately, sitting open on the counter. The pages were filled with tiny, spidery handwriting, each line a name followed by a date and a time. He scanned the entries until one jumped out at him. Emma Cartwright, November 12th, 10:07 a.m. Dan's heart sank. That was the exact time Emma had entered the shop. "What's this?" Dan asked, his tone sharper than he intended. Lawrence's gaze darkened, his polite demeanor dropping like a mask. "That's none of your concern." Dan's hand hovered near his holster. "I think it is." Before he could react, Lawrence grabbed the ledger and slammed it shut. The room filled with a deafening tick-tock, though none of the clocks were moving. Chapter 5. The Truth Beneath the Clock. The next morning, Lawrence Fairchild and his van were gone. But the shop wasn't empty. Sheriff Porter and a small team broke down the locked door, hoping to find answers. What they found was something out of a nightmare. The walls were lined with clocks, their faces warped and spinning erratically, some frozen in impossible configurations. The air buzzed with static electricity, and the floorboards groaned as if under immense weight. In the back room, they found the ledger, its pages now blank. And then they found the bodies. Tucked away in a hidden basement, Dozens of desiccated corpses lay sprawled among broken clock parts. Their faces were twisted in expressions of horror, and their hands were clawed as if reaching for something unseen. The worst part? Each body was surrounded by shattered glass, as if they had been inside the clocks when they broke. Chapter 6. The twist you have all been waiting for. Stillbrook tried to move on. The shop was boarded up, the clocks destroyed, and the townsfolk prayed for peace. But one night, a week after Lawrence's disappearance, Sheriff Dan Porter found a package on his porch. Inside was a small clock, its hands spinning backward. Beneath it lay a note in Lawrence's handwriting. "Time's up, Dan. Your name's in the book." As the clock began to chime, Dan felt an icy grip on his chest. He glanced at his reflection in the mirror and saw his face aging before his eyes. By the time his wife found him the next morning, all that was left was a pile of dust and a broken clock ticking away the seconds. They say Fairchild's clock still appears in towns where time has grown too complacent. And when it does, you'd better keep track of the time, or you might just lose it forever.